Marcus Thorne dragged himself up the narrow staircase to his fourth-floor apartment, every step echoing his exhaustion. His shift at the distribution center had stretched 12 hours. Today, another mandatory overtime that paid barely enough to cover rent in this crumbling sector of the colony. His uniform clung to his skin, damp with sweat in the humid air that never seemed to clear from the lower districts. The hallway smelled of boiled vegetables and recycled air. Someone's radio played too loudly 3 doors down, the same news. Broadcast he'd heard cycling all week about trade disputes and labor shortages. Marcus fumbled for his keys, fingers stiff from loading cargo pods, when he heard it water running. In his apartment, he froze, key halfway to the lock. The sound was unmistakable, his shower, running at full pressure. His heart hammered against his ribs. The water rations were strictly monitored, even 5 minutes over the daily allowance. Meant a fine he couldn't afford. More pressing. Someone was inside his locked apartment. Marcus pressed his ear to the door, listening past his own thundering pulse. No voices, no movement, except the steady hiss of water. His mind raced through possibilities. A burst pipe? No, too controlled. A brick-in. His few possessions weren't worth stealing, but desperate people did desperate things. He slid the key in slowly, turned it without making a sound, and eased the door open just enough to slip inside. Steam leaked from beneath the bathroom door, carrying the scent of his cheap soap. The rest of the apartment looked untouched, his small table. Single chair, the narrow cot pushed against the wall. Nothing disturbed except the faint trail of muddy water leading from the fire escape window to the bathroom. Someone had climbed 5 stories up the rusted ladder outside his building. Marcus grabbed the metal rod he used to prop open the sticky window, whose only weapon, and approached the bathroom door. His mouth felt dry as cotton. "Whoever's in there," he called out, trying to keep his voice steady. "You need to leave. Now." The water didn't stop, but a voice answered through the door. Female? Hoarse with exhaustion. "I'm not stealing anything, I swear. I needed clean water." Marcus hesitated. The voice carried a note of genuine desperation, not the aggressive edge he'd expect from a thief. Still, she'd broken into his home. "Step out where I can see you," he said, hands visible. "I can't," came the reply. "I don't have. Clothes are ruined." "Please, I'll be gone in 5 minutes. I just needed to wash." Something in her tone made Marcus lower the metal rod slightly. He'd heard that particular brand of exhaustion before in the voices of workers who'd been cut from their contracts, left with nowhere to go, and no credits for basic necessities. "Who are you?" he asked. "My name is Zara Nix. I worked the night shift at the refinery until last week." Her voice wavered. "They said the quota was down. They said they didn't need as many hands." Marcus knew that story. The colony's economy ran on disposable labor. When the numbers didn't add up, workers simply disappeared from the official rolls. No severance, no transition housing, no safety net. "Why my apartment?" he asked. Double quotes, because ... She paused, and he heard her take a shaky breath. "Because I saw you once. At the transit stop. You gave your meal voucher to that family with the sick kid. I didn't think anyone noticed, but I did." Marcus's throat tightened. He remembered that day a week ago, maybe 2. Couple with 3 young children, the youngest burning with fever and not enough credits for both medicine and food. He'd handed over his lunch voucher without thinking twice, told them he wasn't hungry anyway. "That doesn't give you the right to break in," he said, but the edge had left his voice. "I know," Zara replied. "I know it doesn't. But I've been sleeping in the drainage tunnels for 6 days. I haven't been clean and... Please. 5 more minutes and I'll disappear. You'll never see me again." Marcus stood in the hallway, the metal rod heavy in his hand, steam seeping around his feet. Every rational thought told him to call building security, to get her out before neighbors started asking questions. This wasn't his problem, he had enough struggles keeping his own life together, but the image wouldn't leave his mind. Someone so desperate they'd climb 5 stories through a storm. risk breaking and entering charges just for 5 minutes of clean water. The water meters. Going to flag the overage, he said finally. I'll pay for it, she said quickly. I have a few credits left. I'll transfer them to your account. Marcus closed his eyes, made a decision that would change everything. Finish washing, he said. Then we talk. The silence stretched so long. He thought she might not have heard him, and so quietly he almost missed it. Thank you. He walked to the kitchen and put the kettle on, his hands steadier now than they'd been in the hallway. Through the bathroom door, he heard her moving carefully, economically. Like someone who'd learned not to waste anything, not time, not water, not the brief kindness of strangers. Marcus stared out the rain-streaked window at the gray sprawl of the colony below and wondered what he'd just gotten himself into. The water shut off with a mechanical click that seemed unnaturally loud in the small apartment. Marcus found himself holding his breath, listening to the faint sounds of movement from the bathroom, the rustle of fabric, the soft pad of bare feet on wet tiles. I need something to wear. Zara's voice came through the door, smaller now, uncertain. Marcus looked around his sparse apartment. His work uniforms hung on a hook by the door, too large and too masculine. Then he remembered. The old thermal shirt he'd kept from his previous job, softer fabric, smaller cut. He pulled it from the bottom of his single drawer. I'm leaving something by the door, he said, placing the shirt on the floor and stepping back. The door cracked open just enough for a hand to emerge. Pale blue skin with darker markings along the wrist and fingers. Not human then. Marcus had known intellectually that the colony employed various species, but he'd never been this close to one of the off-worlders before. Her hand was elegant, long-fingered, with subtle ridges along the knuckles that caught the dim light. When the door opened again, she stepped out, wearing his thermal shirt like a dress. It fell to mid-thigh, the gray fabric making her skin look luminous. Her hair was a deep teal, now clean and falling in wet waves past her shoulders. But it was her eyes that stopped him large, amber-colored with flecks of gold. Set in a face that was recognizably humanoid, but undeniably alien. She was beautiful in a way that made his chest tight. Thank you, she said, her voice clearer now. Without the barrier of the door, she spoke softly, as if unused to being heard. Marcus gestured toward the small table. Sit. You said you'd explain. Zara moved carefully, every step deliberate, and settled into the single chair. Marcus remained standing, leaning against the kitchen counter, maintaining distance between them. The refinery laid off 30% of the night shift, she began, her hands folded in her lap. They kept the humans and the Andorians stronger. Species, they said, better suited for heavy labor. Her mouth tightened. He didn't mention that we Zelani have better night vision, more precise motor control. We could do delicate work the others couldn't, Zelani, Marcus repeated. He'd heard the term but never connected it to the people it described. From the Outer Rim colonies, Zar said. My family came here when I was 15, indentured service. Contract 20 years. My parents died in an industrial accident 7 years in. I've been working off their debts since. The casual way she said it hit Marcus like a physical blow. Debt slavery was illegal in the core worlds, but the outer colonies operated under different rules. Different definitions of freedom. How much time did you have left? He asked. 6 months, she said quietly. After 13 years, I had 6 months left. They terminated the contract for economic necessity. She looked up at him. Those amber eyes steady, despite the exhaustion written in every line of her body. The debt transfers to the colony administration now. I can work it off through public service, if I can find housing, if I can stay registered, without an address. I become undocumented. Undocumented workers disappear. Marcus felt the weight of that statement. He'd heard the rumors about the detention facilities on the colony's edge. The transport ships that left full and returned empty. You could have gone to social services, he said, though, even as he spoke, he knew how hollow it sounded. Zara's laugh was bitter. With what identification? They confiscated my work permit when they terminated the contract. I have 48 hours to find new employment or report for processing. That was yesterday. The timeline hit him like cold water. She had less than a day before she'd be classified as a runaway debtor. Not try the employment center. I did. Her voice was flat now, matter of fact. They have 3 openings for Zilani workers. All. In the deep mining sector, average life expectancy there is 18 months. Marcus stared at her, understanding settling in his stomach like lead. She hadn't broken into his apartment because she was desperate for a shower. She'd done it because she was desperate to live. So what's your plan? He asked. Survive until morning, she said simply. Then figure out how to survive the next day. The honesty of it, the complete absence of self-pity, made something twist in Marcus's chest. He'd been complaining about overtime shifts and water rations while she'd been counting down the hours until her life ended. You can't stay here, he said, but the words came out weaker than he'd intended. I know. Zara stood, smoothing the thermal shirt down. I'll go after the storm passes. But maybe I can find somewhere in the industrial district, some abandoned building. Where? Sit down, Marcus said. She looked at him questioningly, but sank back into the chair. Marcus ran a hand through his hair, paced to the window and back. Everything rational, everything safe, told him to help her pack her few belongings and wish her luck. She wasn't his responsibility. He barely knew her, but she'd recognized him because of one small act of kindness. She'd climbed 5 stories. In a storm, because she'd seen something in him that made her believe he might help rather than hurt. One night he heard himself say, "You can stay one night. We'll figure out something else tomorrow." The transformation in her face was subtle, but unmistakable. Her shoulders dropped slightly, the rigid tension in her posture easing just a fraction. "I can pay you," she said quickly. "I have. Keep your credits." Marcus cut her off. "You'll need them more than I do." For a moment, neither of them spoke. Rain hammered against the windows, and somewhere in the building's pipes, water gurgled. Through ancient conduits. Why? Zara asked finally. Marcus met her gaze. Because tomorrow, that could be me. Marcus had never realized how small his apartment was until he tried to figure out sleeping arrangements for 2 people. The cot barely fit one person comfortably, and the floor offered nothing but cold metal plating and the occasional vibration from the building's failing climate systems. "You take the bed," he said, pulling a maintenance blanket from the utility closet. "I'll manage on the floor." Zara watched him with those unsettling amber eyes. "You're giving up your bed for someone who broke into your home." "Temporary arrangement," Marcus said, though something in his voice suggested even he didn't quite believe it. She stood and moved to the window, looking out at the storm that showed no signs of letting up. "In my culture, there's a concept called zethmari. This means ... a debt that can't be repaid with money or goods, only with life service." "You don't owe me anything," Marcus said. "I owe you everything." She turned from the window. "Without this night, I would die on the streets." That creates zethmari. Marcus felt uncomfortable with the weight she was placing on his simple offer of shelter. "It's just basic decency." "Decency isn't basic," Zara said quietly. "If it were, I wouldn't have spent 6 days eating scraps and sleeping in drainage pipes." It's the matter-of-fact way she said it made Marcus's chest tight. He busied himself arranging the blanket on the floor, trying not to think about what those 6 days had been like for her. "The lights," he said. "I usually turn them off around, whatever your routine is," Zara interrupted. "I don't want to disrupt more than I already have." Marcus dimmed the apartment's main illumination, leaving only the faint glow from the corridor emergency lighting filtering through the door's crack. In the semi-darkness, Zara's skin seemed to emit its own subtle luminescence, the pale blue. Taking on an almost ethereal quality, she settled onto the cot with careful movements, as if testing whether it would hold her weight, whether this small luxury was real. Marcus arranged himself on the floor, the maintenance blanket providing little cushion against the hard surface. "Marcus," Zara's voice came softly through the darkness. "Yeah, tomorrow, when you go to work, if building security comes around asking questions—" "They won't," Marcus said, though he wasn't entirely certain. "But if they do, they won't find anything," he said firmly. "You were never here." Silence settled between them, broken only by the rain and the distant hum of the building's systems. Marcus stared at the ceiling, hyper-aware of every sound she made, the soft rustle of fabric as she shifted position, the quiet rhythm of her breathing, the barely audible sigh when she finally relaxed. He'd shared close quarters with other people. Before, during his first months on the colony when housing assignments were communal, but this felt different, more intimate somehow, charged with an awareness that made sleep elusive. "Marcus," our voice again, even softer. "Yeah, what you did at the transit stop. With the family? ... That wasn't the first time, was it?" Marcus felt heat rise in his cheeks. "I don't know what you mean. I started noticing you after that. Watching you. Gave credits to the old man who sells flowers by the market entrance. You helped carry groceries for the woman with the broken arm. You never made a show of it, never waited for thanks." "Help each other," Marcus said. "It's not, no," Zara said, and there was something fierce in her voice despite its softness. "Most people don't. Most people look away, pretend they don't see the need right in front of them." Right. Marcus didn't know how to respond to that. He'd never thought of his actions as particularly noteworthy. They were just things that needed doing. Small ways to make the colony's harsh realities a little more bearable. "Why did you notice?" he asked. "Because I was looking for it," she said simply. "When you're desperate, you learn to read people quickly. To spot the ones who might help versus the ones who will hurt you just because they can." The weight of that statement settled heavy in the dark apartment. Marcus thought about all the times he'd walked past homeless workers, displaced families, people down on their luck. How many of them had been studying his face, looking for signs of compassion or cruelty? "Get some sleep," he said finally. "Tomorrow's going to be complicated enough. Good night, Marcus. Good night, Zara." But sleep didn't come easily for either of them. Marcus lay awake listening to her breathing, wondering what he'd committed himself to. Zara lay awake wondering how long his kindness would last and what she'd do when it inevitably ran out. Marcus woke before his alarm, the way he always did when stress made his sleep fitful. Dawn light filtered through the apartment's single window. For a moment he forgot why he was on the floor instead of in his bed. Then he heard the soft sound of movement from the kitchen area. Zara stood at his tiny stove, wearing his thermal shirt and moving with the careful quiet of someone accustomed to not disturbing others. She'd somehow managed to make something that smelled like actual food from his meager supplies. "You didn't have to," Marcus said, sitting up and immediately regretting it, as his back protested sleeping on metal plating. "Habit," Zara said without turning around. "In the workers' quarters, if you didn't cook your shift, you didn't eat. Everyone contributed or everyone went hungry." She turned, offering him a bowl of what looked like porridge, but smelled infinitely better than anything that usually came out of his kitchen. Their fingers brushed as he took it, and he noticed how warm her skin was, almost feverish by human standards. "Zilani run hotter," she explained, catching his reaction. "It's better adaptation to cold environments." They ate in comfortable silence, and Marcus found himself watching the way she moved. Deconomical, graceful, as if every gesture had been refined through necessity. When she finished, she immediately began cleaning the bowl and utensils. "I have to go to work," Marcus said, checking the time display on his wall unit. Zara nodded, not looking at him. "I'll be gone when you get back." Something twisted in Marcus's stomach at those words. "Where will you go?" "I'll figure something out." "That's not an answer." Zara dried her hands on the towel, folded it precisely, and placed it back on its hook. "The industrial district has some abandoned buildings. If I'm careful, I might be able to shelter there for a few days while I look for ... options." Marcus knew what the industrial district was like. Crumbling infrastructure, contaminated air, predators both human and otherwise, who preyed on the desperate. She'd last maybe a week if she was lucky. "Stay," he heard himself say. Zara went very still. "What? Stay here today? Tonight we'll figure out something longer term." "Marcus, you don't understand the risk you're taking. If they find an undocumented Zilani in your apartment, then we make sure they don't find you." She turned to face him fully, and he could see the war playing out behind her. Eyes hope fighting with hard-earned caution. "Why would you do that?" Marcus stood, gathering his work gear. "Because running away isn't a solution. It's just a slower way to die." Before she could respond, he was pulling on his jacket, checking his pockets for his identification cards and work permits. "Don't answer the door," he said. "I'll make any noise that neighbors might hear." "If there's an emergency," he paused, realizing he didn't have a plan for emergencies. "I know how to be invisible," Zara said quietly. "I've had practice." The door, Marcus hesitated. "Zara?" "Yes. If you leave while I'm gone, I'll understand. But I'd rather you didn't." She didn't answer, but something in her expression shifted. It became less guarded. The workday crawled by with excruciating slowness. Marcus found himself checking the time display every few minutes, distracted enough that his supervisor called him over twice to ask if he was feeling well. During his lunch break, instead of eating in the break room, he walked to the nearest public terminal and researched Zalani legal status, deportation procedures, and asylum regulations. What he found made his stomach sink. Zara hadn't exaggerated her situation. Undocumented debt workers had virtually no rights and fewer options. The colony administration's solution to overflow population was efficient and brutal. When his shift finally ended, Marcus practically ran the 5 blocks to his building, taking the stairs 2 at a time despite his exhaustion. He opened his apartment door to find Zara exactly where he'd left her, sitting at his small table with her hair braided back and his thermal shirt somehow transformed into something that looked almost elegant. She'd spent the day organizing his few possessions, cleaning surfaces that hadn't been properly cleaned in months, and creating an atmosphere of careful domesticity. "You stayed," he said, relief evident in his voice. "You asked me to. I thought you might ... practical considerations." "Practical considerations suggested I stay." Zara gestured toward the table where she'd laid out what looked like an actual meal. "I managed to make your rations stretch further. A few more days of this, and you'll actually have better nutrition than you're getting now." Marcus realized what she was doing, proving her usefulness, demonstrating that keeping her around was beneficial rather than charitable. It was a survival strategy, but it made something ache in his chest. "You don't have to earn your place here," he said. "Everything has a cost," Zara replied. "I'd rather pay it in work than an obligation." They ate together as rain began pattering against the windows again, and Marcus found himself thinking that his apartment had never felt quite so much like home. By the 4th day, they'd developed a rhythm that felt almost natural. Marcus would wake to find Zara already in the kitchen, somehow creating meals from ingredients that should have been impossible to combine. She'd have his work clothes ready, cleaned and arranged with a precision that spoke of military or industrial training. "You're going to spoil me," Marcus said, accepting the cup of coffee. She'd somehow improved with spices he didn't know he owned. "That's the idea," Zara replied, but her tone was light, almost teasing. The change in her demeanor over the past few days had been remarkable. The desperate edge had softened into something more complex, still cautious, but with flashes of dry humor and unexpected warmth. Marcus found himself looking forward to coming home in a way he never had before. "I've been thinking," he said, pulling on his jacket, "about your documentation problem." Zara's hand stilled on the dish. "She was cleaning, Marcus. We talked about this. There's no legal path." "Not legal," Marcus interrupted, "but not impossible either." She turned to face him, amber eyes sharp with attention. "There's someone at the distribution center. Cris Valdez. Handles data processing for the employment office. We've talked a few times, he seems flexible. About certain regulations. Flexible how? The kind of flexible that costs credits but doesn't ask questions?" Zara was quiet for a long moment, considering. "How much? I don't know yet. I thought I'd feel him out today, see what might be possible." "What money?" Zara asked. "You're barely covering your own expenses?" Marcus shrugged. "I'll figure something out." "No." Her voice was firm. "I won't let you go into debt for me. It's my choice. It's not just your choice anymore." She stepped closer to him, close enough that he could see the subtle patterns in her skin, like watermarks under the pale blue surface. "What happens to me affects you now. If you can't make rent because you've spent credits on my documentation, then we're both on the streets." The casual way she said we made something flutter in Marcus's chest. When had she started thinking of them as a unit? "Then what do you suggest?" he asked. "Let me think about it," There might be other options. Marcus nodded, though he could see the wheels turning behind her eyes and wasn't sure he'd like whatever plan she was developing. That evening, Marcus returned to find the apartment subtly different. Zara had rearranged the furniture not much, but enough to create the illusion of more space. She'd also somehow acquired additional food supplies. Where did this come from? Marcus asked, looking at the fresh vegetables and protein packs that definitely hadn't been in his kitchen that morning. Trade, Zara said simply. Trade with? Who? You haven't left the apartment. The building's service tunnels connect to the adjacent blocks. I know the maintenance schedules when the corridors are empty. She began preparing dinner, her movements efficient and practiced. There's a black market network that operates through the service areas. Mostly displaced workers like me, people who've fallen through the official cracks. Marcus felt a chill. Zara, if you're caught in the service tunnels without authorization, I know the risks. She didn't look at him, focusing intently on chopping vegetables. But I also know what I'm good at. Mechanical repair, systems diagnostics, electrical work. People need those skills, and they're willing to trade for them. What did you trade? Fixed a heating unit for a family 2 buildings over. Repaired a water filtration system for a group of construction workers. Small jobs, paid in food and supplies. Marcus stared at her. You're a technician, among other things. Zara finally looked up from her preparation. The refinery didn't just need heavy labor. We maintained the processing equipment, handled quality control, monitored environmental systems. But when the layoffs came, they classified us all as unskilled labor to justify the terminations. The casual injustice of it made Marcus's jaw clench. That's economics, Zara finished. Easier to replace people than to acknowledge their value. They ate in thoughtful silence, and Marcus found himself watching Zara with new eyes. He'd been thinking of her as someone he was helping, someone vulnerable who needed protection. But she was resourceful, skilled, making connections, and finding opportunities he never would have imagined. The black market, he said finally.
How?
Extensive, is it? More than you'd think. There's an entire parallel economy running through the maintenance areas and abandoned sections. People who can't access official services, creating their own, in your legal status. Less of a problem there. They don't ask for documentation when you can fix their broken equipment. Marcus felt something shift in his understanding of their situation. Maybe Zara didn't need to be rescued. Maybe she needed to be supported while she built something new. That night, as they settled into their routines, Ara on the cot, Marcus on the floor, the conversation continued in the darkness. Marcus, yeah, tomorrow, would you be interested in meeting some of these people? The ones I've been trading with? Marcus considered this. Meeting them would mean acknowledging his involvement in the underground economy, crossing a line from simple charity into active participation. Yeah, he said. I think I would. In the dark apartment, Zara smiled for the first time since he'd known her.